What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy. And before we get into the episode today, if you're new to the podcast, we do have rants, mental minutes, and then also deep dive educational explorations where we break down some research or go into a little bit more rabbit holes of what we need to go into. But um, if you have any future guests, future topics, anything that you guys want to hear, please email that in to inthezone123@gmail.com and share the show because we don't run ads or do sponsorships in any way. We just want to spread knowledge and help guys learn and grow the game. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and bring on CJ Appenzeller. What's going on, CJ?
What's up, man? Big day today. I'm really excited. I'm fired up. I think we just had a quick chat off air, and now I'm really rolling. Like,
Oh,
let's
yeah,
do this
we're in
thing.
it. We
Yeah.
are in it. Just get the caffeine and you're ready to rock. I love the saying right behind you. So for those of you who are listening and not watching, it says changing lives one rep at a time. And I think that really pays to, not only what our podcast is about of being in the zone, but being present one rep at a time, every single rep or every single task that you're doing and being in that present moment, being locked in it definitely can change someone's life whenever they kind of get that just overall inept skill down, right?
Yeah, it's for us, it's a couple things, right? So number one, it's the idea that coaching is permission based, right? So no one wants to be walked up to in the gym by some random guy and be like, "Hey, I have a tip for your squat technique," or maybe you should stop doing that exercise. It's bad for your back, or whatever the rumor is. So it's permission based. So to get someone's permission to coach them, you have to earn some level of their trust. So it's a constant reminder to us that like the people in front of us, myself, my team, they trust us, and they trust us with something pretty important to them, right? Whether it's their life, their lifestyle, or, their longevity, or it's their baseball career, sporting career, whatever the case may be. So we have this great opportunity. We have this permission. And then the second piece to that is this idea of like, hey, the lessons that we learn, the things that we cover in the weight room, in the gym, on the track, or on the turf go far beyond the actual sporting application. Yeah, I'll probably help you pack on lean muscle. Yeah, I'll probably help you run a faster 60, throw harder, in the baseball context for sure, and hopefully stay healthy while doing it, which is, I'm sure, something we'll get into. But even more importantly than that, at some point, everyone's career ends. And when that career ends, what have we instilled from a mentality approach, from a work ethic side of things, and really from a community side of things that they can then take and use in whatever phase of their life or whatever zone of their life, to utilize your terminology there, they move into next.
Oh yeah, I fully agree. It's the those foundational skill sets that can be pivotal in anything, whether it's new career, being a, you know, in our case, husband or wife or, whatever it is that
Yep.
you get laid in front of you for your life, man. Like they're going to be skills that you're going to apply in anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to kind of pivot off of that, the work ethic that a lot of guys get to instill whenever they're doing all this stuff, right? It it's almost disheartening whenever I see an athlete be like, "Oh, hey, yeah, all right, I'm done playing, I'm done training, I don't need to do any stuff like that." I'm like, "No, dude, you're not done. Like this is something that you have to continue to do for the rest of your life if you want to stay mobile and healthy and just utilize." And I kind of make a reference to you know the um the parable of the talents, right? Where you have guys who get one talent, or five talents, 10 talents. The guy with the one talent just buries it and doesn't do anything with it. Like, don't be that guy, right? Whatever
Yep.
talent it is, even if you do have one or two things, right? You got to be able to know how to build on what you have and utilize it for the greater good.
100%. And I think that goes back to like, your transition, my transition into coaching. And I think I read a little bit of your story. This was probably a while ago that I read this. So sorry for being a creep.
No, you're
But I
fine.
remember a bit of that like transition and you kind of finding your voice as a coach. Right.
Yeah.
And I think you put out an Instagram post and it was maybe like you playing catch when you were younger or something like that. Told you I'm
Yep.
creepy. This is way back. um, and I remember it resonated with me because I remember when I knew, and I was talking about this with somebody else too. I remember when I knew, like, I'm not going to play professional baseball. Like I'm a Division III athlete. Like I'm probably not going to be, they're probably not going to be calling out my name and starting nine for the Philadelphia Phillies. But I knew there was something more there, and that the tools and the things that I had kind of instilled within myself and with some good mentors along the way and some bad ones too, which they teach us almost as much, right?
Sure.
Bad coaches. But I knew that there was another level, there was another utilization purpose or a use case for these kind of index of, as you said, like talents that we've kind of developed. And that's what got me excited to coach. And that's what really started to kind of, I don't know, flame the fire of my passion for coaching. I mean, I'm so passionate about coaching. It's something that I do now because I literally want to. Like, it actually hurts our business for me to go out on the floor and coach because there's probably higher level tasks from a business perspective that I
Hmm.
could be doing. But I just love it, so that's what I do. And that's what I believe I was put here on earth to do, was to inspire change. And that, to me, my kind of my ticket, my way in which I do that is through coaching. So interesting stuff,
No, I love
when
it, man. I
that way.
think, yeah, well, even for all the places that I've been and people I've worked under, I've always gravitated towards the ones who like to put in the work, right? They're not the guy up top doing all the puppet string, pulling all the strings, and you're just like, you're doing this, you're doing this. Like being able to lead by example. And a good example of this just in the sporting world was a high school coach that I had called Coach, or his name was Coach Davis. Played first base at University of Arkansas Little Rock, right? And so it was a local. That's where I'm from, right? So
Yep.
he was a local guy and working his way up to end up being superintendent, which I think he is now. But he would legit go out on the field. He'd be like, "Hey, give me your glove," and then show me how to like pick or how to do these things. And I'm like, that is a coach that I wanted to be around, not the one that sits
Yep.
on the bucket or gripes and yells and screams at you all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. Like, being able to demonstrate is like one of our, so we grade coaches on 10 core frameworks, and it's one of our core frameworks, like being able to demonstrate, right? But even more so than that, I think what we're really getting at is this idea of like someone who's in the trenches with you,
Yeah,
got
absolutely.
who's got their helmet on too.
Mhm.
And we do that different ways. We do that from being able to like actively participate in sport, but we also do that from being able to speak the language of the athlete. And the language of the athlete is kind of like its own almost individual for each human you interact with, right? Because we're all kind of uniquely different in that way. One athlete might
Sport
be
has
much
its own.
exactly. One athlete might be like me, where scrap, claw, everything you have just to get the opportunity to play. Whereas another athlete might just go out there, throw their glove out there, and be guaranteed to be a starter and a Division I commit. And I work with both of those, but you have to understand how to communicate with both of those separately, because the communication strategy and the way in which they hear you is very, very different based on kind of their background and where they're coming from that perspective. And I think to be in the trenches is to speak that language on all fronts.
Oh, 100%. I like what you touched on there. So not to get too far off topic of that, but have you just over all the years of coaching, have you recognized how certain guys you just kind of know what level they're going to be playing at it early on? Like when you start working with them 13, 14 or 16, for me, it's like, oh, there's the D2 or D3 guy. They're like, oh, hey, what are guys my age doing for this metric or whatever it is, like a vertical jump, for example,
Yep.
right? Versus another kid, maybe same age, but he's like, okay, hey, what are the pros doing? Or hey,
Yep.
who's the best at this? And they'll ask those questions. I'm like, yep, you're gonna go really far. This kid's probably not gonna go as far, just based off how they're communicating with you.
Yep, absolutely. Their approach, right? The way they show up and do things. One of our big ones, we have a kid right now who is going to be an absolute dog. He's a sophomore in high school. He's going to have, I mean, he has some SEC kind of interest already and things like that.
Yeah.
And this kid's been training with me since he's 10 years old. And I remember when he would show up at 10 years old and the way he approached the training, not like so much what he was doing metric wise, but the way
Mhm.
he approached it 10 minutes early, water bottle full, electrolytes next to the water bottle, like those little things, right? Stay late. Hey, what can I do at home? Those types of questions. And I already knew, like, hey, his brother plays Division I. Actually, his brother's a sophomore, just finished up, or is in the playoffs right now. Is finishing up a tremendous campaign. So like the skill caliber's probably there,
Mhm.
but this kid is showing up as if it's work, enjoying it. I'm not trying to encourage 10-year-olds to like forget,
Super
being
rich,
a
man.
kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this wasn't even something we started with him. He showed up like this.
Yeah.
How often can I come? How much
Mhm.
do I get to train? Versus when do I have to come? When do I have to train?
Sure.
Right. So some
Well,
of some of the things
yeah.
you're talking about. Yeah.
That bleeds over to maybe even just some of the coaches that you're bringing on too. Like you can tell which ones are going to do the bare minimum and which ones are going to actually go in and just light it up, right? They're going to go the extra mile. They're going to be the ones reading the research papers at midnight or programming in their free time because they enjoy doing it, right? Almost to a fault. Like for me, I wish early on I would have been like, "Hey, take a chill pill, dude. Like you don't have to
Yep.
stay up till 2 a.m. making sure that all your programs are correct."
Yeah, it's like I'm working in reverse at some points, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Oh, for sure.
we're blessed, we have a really great staff right now. But I think some of that is telltale of the community in the gym, right? To the point where we bring guys in for an internship and we know not nearly immediately, like if they're gonna make it, number one, or number two, if they
Mhm.
could be a good fit. I have a shadow who's here for his second day on Wednesday, and we offered him an internship on the spot. He was like, "Oh, are you serious? Like, this is amazing. How do you know it's me? I don't know anything." We're like, "Yeah, we can teach you to be less stupid, of course. But what we can't teach you is the way in which you're showing up, the way in which you carry yourself, the way in which you're communicating effectively with people that you literally met 2 days ago. That those kind of soft skills of coaching, which are on our course sheet as hard skills, are actually significantly more important through the hiring process than even their knowledge of training. And we get into the weeds on training, but I argue all the time on social media, which I'm trying to do actually more. Shout out engagement algorithm, but
There you
like we
go.
get into the weeds of yeah, we get into the weeds of like what's good training, what's not good training. There's gray area, right? Context drives decision making. So when we just see a clip of an athlete doing a thing, we can't really speak to the context of it. So even if you did know something coming in, I probably have to teach you my way anyway. So it's
Sure.
almost easier if you're just naive to the training piece, but an awesome person, and then let me upskill you in the training department.
Absolutely. No, I'm totally with you on that because those are like the intangibles, I guess, or certain things where in the baseball world you use the terminology, oh, hey, is he a good clubhouse guy? Right? Like
Yep.
is he a guy who everyone wants to be around, hang around, have conversations with, or is he to himself? I mean, and some of them even could be successful coaches out there that have that same approach and they just sort of like the players put up with it because they're like, hey, this guy's really good. I know that he's going to get me to from point A to point B, but just kind of terrible people.
Yeah,
And
it happens. It happens. It happens in all sectors, right? You have those guys who you hear are bad clubhouse guys. You
Mhm.
have guys that we see day in and day out on TV who aren't, quote unquote gamers, but they're so highly skilled and so technically flawless that you have that push pull. To your point, players might deal with a coach who's like that, and coaches are going to deal with players who are like that. Like, if you can put up the stat line to suggest that there's value there, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess depending on who you ask, you're going to have some of those guys. So for us in our business, we don't have space for it, but at the
Mhm.
highest level, you might get some of those. You might sneak some through.
Yeah, no, it's very true. But that also kind of goes down to just quality of product of what you're trying to offer is the service. So,
Yep.
no one's gonna like to have a, you use it as like going to a restaurant, for example, like anyone has a bad waiter or waitress, like they're not gonna tip you. So
Yeah.
same thing for in the service of coaching people, like, hey, if you don't treat them right, they're not gonna come back. Yeah.
Exactly right.
They'll
Exactly
go
right.
find someone else that's, and not saying that you need to, blow smoke up their butt the entire time and just cheer them on. Like you got to have constructive criticism and things like that as well. But yes, you gotta know how to communicate. I think that would be I don't know if you have that as one of your pillars, but
It
clear
is. Yeah.
communication is huge.
Yes, one of the things we talk about, right? We call them car ride moments in our high school athlete department because some of our athletes drive, but most of them get dropped off by mom or dad. So we call them car ride moments, and the discussion is that if an athlete gets in the car after a workout, and mom or dad is obviously going to ask unequivocally, "How was the workout?" And if Johnny says it was good, we have lost, right? As a coaching staff, we have failed. We are moving in the direction of losing that athlete. We're moving in the direction of losing, from a business perspective, a client. We don't even communicate that way, but that's a very real thing. But on the other side of that equation, we're probably going to lose the true ability to change their life because good is not good enough. There has to be an opportunity for a lockdown moment. And like you just said, a lockdown moment doesn't have to be, "You're so great, Johnny, you're the best," if that's not necessarily true. because you can lock down a moment in the other direction just as well. Hey, Jeff, I got to have a real serious conversation with you. You know, I love you, right? Yep. You've been here for a little bit. Yep. Here's the deal. You're not taking this serious as opposed to what you told me you wanted to accomplish. You're doing okay. You came 4 times to train this month, right? So once a week. That's okay. And I would let you go with that if I didn't care about you. But I do care about you. And you told me that you wanted to play X. You wanted to play Division I baseball. I'm going to tell you right now that 1 time per week for the last 4 weeks is not enough training, and you're not in the right headspace mentally and or body space physically to play at that level. That is also a lockdown moment because now Jeff gets in the car and dad asks, hey, how was the workout? Jeff's going to say, you know what? CJ kind of laid into me, but it's not good. And it's not bad either. Hey, CJ kind of laid into me. And then dad's going to have to make a decision, which that's beyond my scope, but dad's going to have to say either CJ's an asshole, we're canceling that shit, which is fine because at least I was honest, right? And I protected my own integrity. Sure. Or CJ's going to say, or dad's going to say, damn, that guy CJ, he might be right. Like, let's work on the scheduling thing. Let's work on this a little bit, Jeff. Like, let's get it done, you know? So those are those opportunities. People come for results, and almost anybody can get you some result, right? I tend to think that we get the best results, but anybody can get you some result, but people stay for experience. And those car ride moments create experience, right? And they kind of systematize experience for us, or at least gives us a metric.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's really cool. I like how you guys make that as the car ride moment or something that sticks, right? Something that you're able to actually not just put numbers and give out a spreadsheet, so to speak. Like, hey, these are your improved metrics, but there's something a little bit more to that you don't see on a dashboard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We have to be able to facilitate that. If we can't, then like there's too many options, right? You just open up Instagram. There's 35 people that will coach you remotely for probably cheaper than we would be in person, right? So if that's the case, then there has to be some level beyond just the result. It's great to get results, and you should. But that should be like kind of the buy-in to being a coach, right? Is like I can create a consistent result for athletes. The next level is let me create an experience and an opportunity to change their life. So
I love it. Well, I want to kind of, I guess, give you a scenario or an athlete, so to speak, who, since we were kind of talking about that, let's say Jimmy's his name. I use that a lot in a lot of my podcasts.
all right, Jimmy.
So just kind of like, this is our avatar Jimmy guy. He's 14, has some things where he's been dealing with arm pain on and off, but, strength base is relatively low. But he wants to improve his 60 time. He has high aspirations to play college or, potentially get drafted one day.
Yep.
And, he's put it in the work, but for some reason, when he's doing things, he's not mentally locked in or in the zone, right? What is something like, obviously you could have that conversation like you alluded to before, but is there anything within your training that you make him also be a little bit more mentally engaged where it's not kind of just going through the motions of the same thing over and over again?
Yeah.
How would you approach that?
Yeah, so I think a few things, right? Like number one, if the core competency that's lacking is his mental engagement, then we're going to give him some opportunity for immediate feedback, right? And whether that be verbal feedback from a coach, which is okay, and I think even better is metric feedback at some level, right? Assuming he's healthy. I know we said arm pain, so we got to kind of maybe
Yeah. Well, you can scratch
yeah,
that.
so that's okay. Maybe we address that too, which I have some good metrics for that, which everybody who works with athletes can just steal and be able to buy
Sure.
a
Yeah, I'd
$25
love to hear
grain
those.
scale. Yeah, so like a 14-year-old who has like posterior shoulder pain or even anterior shoulder pain, right? That a lot of PTs might say like biceps tendinopathy, and hopefully nobody sues me. This is not medical advice, all those things. The first thing I would do is if you have biceps tendinopathy or anterior shoulder pain or true posterior shoulder pain, I would check isometric external rotation strength with a crane scale. It is literally, crane scales are like 25, $30 on Amazon if you get the right one. And you don't need a high rate one for this because our pro guys, when they come home, like will be sub 30 pounds of external rotation strength.
Wow.
And
They're lower than 30?
yeah, sub 30. And I only know they're sub 30 is because I don't green light them to get back with pitching, with throwing, with any of that. So a lot of people use like an arbitrary window, like, oh, it's 7 days, it's 14 days, it's 21 days. Mine is when you hit 30 pounds of external rotation strength, then or vice metric external rotation strength around 90 degrees, then you can go start throwing and on ramp appropriately from a load management
Yeah.
standpoint.
So for those of you watching, it's like 90 here, crane scale, boom.
Bang. That's it. Yep. It's that
Yeah.
easy. So that would be like one of the things I would give him. So Jimmy would be like, hey, like my shoulder always hurts every time I go. You did it. I'm like, hey, Jimmy, come here. And we test. And he tests and he goes, oh my God, is that good? Right. That's the first thing, by the way. Every single
Yeah.
kid ever, is that good? It's like, no, Jimmy, that's 9 pounds.
It's just
and I
numbers.
tell and I tell him exactly what I just said. I said, well, we don't, and I always refer back to the pros. Not that a 14-year-old is going to have the same rotator cuff strength as the pros, but I refer back to the pros and I put context around it. I say, hey, we don't let our guys throw until they're at 30 pounds. When we're doing a biceps tendinopathy return to throw, which we do a ton, that's the metric. It's 30 pounds, right? So now we have a metric that we can chase. Is that the only thing contributing to his arm pain? Probably not, right? Scapular mechanics probably contributing to arm pain. Serratus anterior control and or strength stability are probably off too. Those have to be addressed, right? But that's kind of the aside on the arm pain. With Jimmy just getting dialed and getting focused for output metrics, right? Number one, I want to give him immediate feedback, like we said. Our big ones are we use pocket radars so much.
Oh yeah.
And, dude, we
Med ball
love them.
throws and yeah, I
Yeah,
was
on med
just
ball
doing that
throws.
yesterday. Yeah.
Yep. Oh my God, dude. Yeah. If we're doing so the way we normally work it in like a 3-week wave is we'll do week 1 of like kind of accumulation for a medicine ball variation. So we'll do higher reps and we won't do so much tracking with the pocket radar. Week 2 is always output week. So we're going to track almost every rep and I'm going to put them in partners. We have 3 floating around in the gym. We usually train 6 guys at a time. So everybody's got a partner, everybody's got a radar gun. And I say to them, I say, hey, listen, I want every single rep feedback given to this guy. Every rep, whether it's me holding it or you holding it, whoever, holding it like that. And then week 5, so it's accumulation, output, and then capacity, or week 3, excuse me. We do 5 reps, that's why. Week 3, we do 5 reps where we're now trying to get consistent with the metrics we hit last week, every single repetition for 5+ reps in a set. So again, accumulation, output, then capacity. That's how we usually do it. But you want to see guys get fired up about training with medicine balls, about throwing a 4 or 2 pound object hard, put a pocket radar on it, right? Vertical jumps, we use a jump mat. It's that easy. Like jump higher because the jump mat said so. Sprints, we have both. So from like a timing, like event standpoint, we use laser times. But for just like training every day, we use a Freelap blue chips or Bluetooth system. It's really easy. We have way too many chips now. I bought 12 of them. I shouldn't have done that. Very expensive. I will never financially recover from this, but it makes our sessions flow really easy. Everybody gets their own chip. We have a kid who came in for an assessment, took my chip, never brought it back. That kid's listening, bring my damn chip back. But yeah, so we're constantly providing that feedback, right? And I think that type of feedback from a power standpoint, from an output standpoint, especially something that's quote unquote less trackable, like lifting weights is easy because there's weights on the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
But throwing med ball harder is just that. It's like, did I throw it harder? I don't know. Like putting some metrics around that could help Jimmy get in the zone. And then the other thing I thought of was the way we work is in small groups. So it's like, dude, if nothing else gets you in the zone, then training against either your competition, literally, quite literally, or your teammate where you're competing, within the team structure. I mean, that's pretty telltale. And for us, like we work off what we call an athlete first model. I always tell our guys, like, whatever team you play for, we'll just use a pro team. Say it's the Yankees, right? I literally don't care if the Yankees win. People are like, who's your favorite team in baseball? I'm like, I don't care. I have none. As long as Ron wins. What does Ron winning mean? Ron going out and pitching well. When he wins, I win. That's winning for me. So I don't care. And that's the model we use even down to our high schools. Like, oh, did St. Augustine prep win? I'm like, I don't really care. That one's a hard one because we trained 7 of their 9 starters. So it's like, well, we kind of got to root for them, right? But it's like, I just want our guys to win. And when our guys win, that's what we do. And then when they come in here, we talk to them about that. It's like, today is for Alex to win. I don't care what your high school team does. You have to win. So if you have a guy on your team right next to you, it's up to you to win. It's an athlete first model, right? When we use that model, it makes decision-making easier, number one, from a coaching standpoint, but number two, from an in the zone standpoint. I mean, if you can't get in the zone to compete with the guy next to you, maybe competitive sports or athletics aren't for you. And that's another kind of conversation.
Oh man. Yeah. That's
You know,
that's definitely a different conversation.
Yeah, so those would be kind of my three big things. Number one, if he's in pain, let's get some metrics around that pain. And that was
Mhm.
just one example that we use, like I said, for biceps tendinopathy quite frequently. Number two, let's get metric feedback on performance output. And then number three, let's put him in a group with guys around his same skill and capacity level. They're going to push him, stretch him. Hopefully, they're on his team or literally direct competitors.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. And then just kind of out of curiosity, I know you put this on your social media of like how you are training the 60 time. Do you
Yep.
have guys run 60s often, or is that something that you just kind of are like, hey, we're going to go out here and once you go to your showcase, that's when you're running the 60?
Yep. So this might hurt somebody's feelings somewhere, but I've never had, no, not never, maybe once in 12 or 14 years had somebody run a 60 in training. So almost never. When I get guys ready for pro days at the college level for football, I don't have them run full 40s. Like, I don't see the need, especially with the 60, the risk reward kind of continuum is skewed in the wrong direction. And not only that, but also the stimulus to fatigue ratio is skewed pretty mightily. You know, to have a guy run a top speed sprint for 60 yards is far beyond what they do on the field ever, right? Because again, the 60, you know, born home to second, right? But you're literally forgetting two turns, like from a
Mhm.
6 yard dash to a double. Um, so number one, they don't ever do that. So the tissue prep for that is very low, right? Number one. And then number two, I don't see the need for that risk and or that recovery when we can get almost all the advantages from things like 30s. You know, that's probably as
Mhm.
far as we'll go. We get out to the track or to the turf down the street here, and we do a lot of like fly 10s, fly 20s with 10 and 20-yard builds. But yeah, that'll be our top speed day. And with team sports guys for top speed work, a lot of times I'm working top speed into a complex. So maybe it's a dribble followed by a walk, a drop in sprint, followed by a fly sprint, something like that, with time in between.
Mhm.
And
Oh yeah,
that's usually how we're training top speed.
I love it. I love it. And a lot of it too is right. Like I'm sure you probably have this broken down depending on the guy. Like let's say he's really poor at accelerating,
Yeah, oh,
out of the
yeah,
go. It's like,
yeah,
hey, like what is the point of trying to go all the way for that full 60 if your first move sucks?
yeah,
You got to get that down first because that'll
yeah,
shave a couple seconds just right there, just from doing
yeah.
that.
We train all of our position guys sprint twice a week, acceleration focus every week. The only time that changes is during the high school baseball season. We shift from 2 acceleration days and then a third potential top speed day.
Hmm.
We shift that to 1 top speed day, 1 acceleration day. And then the acceleration day, super minimal volume during the in season, because that's essentially what they're doing in practicing games are
Oh, sure.
hyper high intensity accelerations followed by decels, right? Zach DeCant put out some great information that he had from his GPS work with the TCU guys. And one of the really cool kind of, I don't know, light bulb moments for me was listening to that a couple of years ago. And he said that his shortstop in one practice, or I think it was one practice, did 65 decelerations, right? Because every time he took 3 steps and deceled to break down and get a ground ball.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, you know what? I don't think we're doing so much acceleration work in season anymore. We'll do a top speed day with a drop in because we want them to be ready for that one exposure they get per year, right? We don't want that one exposure they get on the long fly ball or the triple to be the first time they hit top speed. So we do that every single week. So they get that exposure, tissue prep. And then we just do the one day of acceleration. And even that acceleration day in season for us, a lot of times we use the tread sled for that too. So we can take out the hard decel.
Oh, nice. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, tread sled's sweet, dude. I got a great deal on it. A good friend of mine and a mentor actually just told me to come pick it up one day. I traded him a Mark Pro. I
For a
definitely won.
Mark Pro for that,
Yeah,
yeah, you definitely won on that
I
trade.
definitely won the trade, man. But he knew I was gonna, he knew I was winning. You know, he was hooking it up. So I appreciate him a bunch for that.
No, yeah, the first time I saw one of those treads, man, those things were legit. And I was like, wow, you're actually measuring the top speed. You're not just like cranking it. I'm like, yeah, all right. And a
Yeah.
lot of guys running for him just instantaneously cleans up too. Obviously, cueing him a little bit too, but just being able
Yep.
to get them to go at that top speed, you're like, Oh wow, all right, yeah. Like you can't you'll know whenever a guy's like halfway sprinting.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you'll have the instant
Absolutely.
feedback, and that
So the
goes back to your feedback piece too.
Exactly. So the way you set up the tread sled, right, is essentially you can angle it in different manners and things like that, which we do, and we play with it, and we put it in such a position on an incline where you're essentially running like a hill start sprint, right?
Mhm.
And the tread in and of itself is self-motorized. So you literally have to push backwards in order to get this to effectively move. So it's literally self-regulating. Like
Yeah,
we don't do this, but you could literally say, hey, I want you to do 10 reps of this, 3 seconds a rep, see you in a little bit. Like they
it's most
physically,
yeah.
exactly, they physically would have to sprint appropriately or get into at least a good positional angle of attack to move the thing at all. So it's pretty cool tool. And that's sometimes what we do in season, but all season and summer ball too, which I'm sure you're getting bombarded with right now.
All
Uh,
over right now. Yeah,
yeah. So I
high
got
school
some
ball's winding down, and now it's summer ball season.
Yeah, I got some content coming out about that because we have some guys that are pulling that card. Like, I'm so busy in the summer. I'm like, how? How can you be so busy? You're not in school. like, like
Yeah.
this is the time to get better. And this idea and this concept of like development versus exposure, and like, are we really should we go and look for maximal exposure if we're 76 to 78 miles an hour off the mound, or if we run an 8 second 60? Like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the thing that you're exposing is that you lack the physicality to probably compete at the next level. And in which
Mhm.
case, you would be much better served developing and utilizing your time and resources doing that. Um, but on the flip side of that, if you're in a blend position where you do have something to go and show, well, it's really easy to structure. I mean, there's 6 events essentially that are, for the highest level guys. There's 6. That's it. That, that's all. And there's only 2 team events that are
Yeah.
like top tier. Now, I'm not saying there's not other events that are opportunities,
Oh,
but
sure. There's
the
other
big,
qualifiers, and yeah.
yeah, of course, but there's the big ones, right? You're gonna go to those things, which I won't shout out for free press for those 6 events, but everybody in the baseball community kind of knows what they are, right? Where
They know
the
the
Power
big
Five schools
ones.
are going to be.
They got them
Yeah,
circled on their
exactly.
calendar. They know where it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, it's interesting, but that's like the piece. So summer ball we treat like preseason, quote unquote. So we still fit in 2 high neurological intensity days during that block, but our second neurological intensity day will be like a primer day. So essentially what I do is, like, from a coaching standpoint, I write the training that I wish we could do, and then I cut the volume in half. And I say,
Mhm.
okay, that's what we're gonna do. Because then that way you're still fresh for the weekend. You can still go and compete in that kind of local tournament and do all those things.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Well, and for those who are probably like, oh, I don't have time, I'm like, yeah, you're probably traveling, but I've been in travel ball positions before, player and, just being around and hearing it. There's a lot of downtime between games in the hotel room. You can knock out some type of mobility or, you know,
100%.
anything to try to get better. And it doesn't have to be grinding in the gym every single time. It can be something as simple as that. Because if you do that every time you have a chance, you might be putting yourself in a better position, maybe to not get injured or to be ready to perform and, like you said, prime your body for
100%.
that next outing, right?
100%. You can either find an excuse or you could find a way with all things, by the way. It's just that simple.
I love it. One thing that caught my eye, and I think we talked about this a little on the air too, was a little bit more on the arm care piece. And I went down the whole triphasic rabbit hole and stuff like that before. So I noticed exactly as soon as you were doing, I was like, oh, hey, that's a rebound.
Yep.
Versus, there's other ones that are concentric, and then there's um, I think there's 3, right? There's the
Yeah. So
isometric pulse one, and then the rebound one that you were doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So usually Cal's like kind of system for that, and I love Cal Dietz. But his system is oscillating isometric, where there is no rebound action. Right?
Mhm.
You never leave, quote unquote, the band. Level 2 is that rebounder that you saw, and then level 3 is antagonistically facilitated shock method, or AFSM, where you're going between bands. Um, and again, these are all just really fast kind of neurological stimulants or neurological drivers, all based off of Sherrington's law of reciprocal inhibition, which is essentially this idea of like contract, relax fast on agonist antagonist side of the joint.
Mhm.
So if you want to throw at the highest level, then you're going to have to be able to do that at some level, right? You're going to have to be able to rapidly contract all the internal rotators of the shoulder, the pec and the lat, and all the like, and then rapidly relax the decelerative muscles of the posterior shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I can't do that effectively, then I'm gonna run into issues. So the video that kind of is going like a little bit quote unquote viral or whatever is Ron going through some of those things, having a little bit of forearm pain. So based on some testing and some different manual muscle stuff that we do, we kind of determined, we're like, man, I think you're just running out of internal rotation. And when we run out of internal rotation, we're going to start to substitute a different pattern to get to ball release. And that stress is going to go into maybe a little bit different tissue than it normally would. In which case, it's like, hey, we're going to reverse engineer this. We restore internal rotation at a high level, right? That might be manual therapy, that might be soft tissue work, that might be, self myofascial release, right? Once we do that, it's like, okay, now we're going to do some positional isometrics to hopefully concrete or cement the range in, number one. And number two, we'll probably do some positional isometrics in like that acute fatigued area
Mm-hmm.
or the traumatized tissue. After we do that, it's like, all right, cool. Now it's essentially we've addressed the concern, we've readdressed the tissues of that concern, we've started to reload them and access the range. Now we have to tap back into the nervous system and tell the nervous system, again, for lack of better terms, that, hey, like this is a safe range to move in rapidly.
Yeah.
And the best way we could do that is to work through some of these kind of reciprocal inhibition type drills at rapid fire pacing. And when we do that, you'll even see in the video, I'm telling him 10 seconds. Like, dude, 10 seconds is that's so many
Long when
reps.
you're on
Yeah,
the
it's a
end of
lot
that
of
day.
reps, dude. So even that is self-limiting, right? I can't do the most powerful thing of all time for 10 seconds, right? I could do it in 1 second. So when we start to build people back in and we talk about load management, it's like, hey, how can I set up this joint to work really hard and potentially really rapidly, but also still have some bumpers on it? And I said this on another podcast, but I'll say it again here. I always talk about bumpers because I suck at bowling. I'm like really bad. My wife actually beat me one time. I still tell her to this day, it was before we were married, I tell her that I let her win, but I'm pretty sure she just beat me. Uh, so like if I'm ever going bowling again, I'm using those bumpers. But like, how can I put bumpers on the neurological stimulus that we're applying to the athlete so that he doesn't go outside of maybe what we're currently prepared for,
Right.
right? And some of the ways in which we do that is like we increase load or we increase the duration of an activity. And like that's the whole idea of blood flow restriction. Now we're off on a tangent, but that's the whole idea of blood flow restriction therapy. Like that's
Right.
why it exists, right? To
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially a bumper, right? To increase intensity without increasing load. But yeah, I don't know if I answered any question or if you asked anything.
No, no, that's perfect. No, I love how
All right,
you kind
cool.
of went on there. You kind of did all my description of that. But I
Yep.
think it is also really important when you utilize that, specifically for guys that are coming back or they're done with their season, to get that range of like, hey, it's okay to move here, or even
Yeah.
returning from injury, because a lot of it, obviously, there's mental pieces along with that. But if you can still learn how to move fast first before you even pick up a ball, your confidence level shoots up where you're just like, hey, okay, cool, this is safe now. I can do this and not have any of that hesitation. Or like, oh, okay, here we go. It's time to
Yep.
throw, right? Like,
100%.
need
We
that.
take, yeah, we take, what do they call those in the training cars, when you're learning how to drive, they don't let you go too fast, too slow, whatever that thing is called.
Has the
Uh,
governor on the
the
particular.
governor.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we take some of the governor off of the athlete, when he gets back out there to throwing. And then, by the way, like that's when, a guy like you who's super versed in pitching comes in and says, hey, like, throw the 7 ounce. And people are like, oh, that's overload. Isn't that harder? It's like, well, no, that in and of itself is a governor. I can only throw the 7 ounce so hard, right? So I can probably theoretically like say, hey, throw that at 90% intensity before I'm ready to throw a baseball at 90% intensity in a
Hmm.
return to throw plan, right? And this is where some people kind of start to get it backwards. Now, from a movement competency standpoint or an integration of technical demands, that's outside probably my true scope. But if we're looking at it, we want to challenge with different loads, right? And that goes all the way back to Bondarchuk, right? And his ideas around over and under load training for the hammer throwers, right? So
Oh
when
yeah.
we look at that, now we can faster apply a technical model when we challenge it with different loading strategies. But I think from a rehab perspective, strictly, or return to throw strictly, utilize those self-governing modalities and let the athlete be an athlete, right? Instead of saying, hey, throw the 5-ounce light, throw it soft. Like, these guys throw 95, 96, 97, 100 miles an hour. What are you talking about? The way in which that actual pattern, the kinematic sequencing of that to throw soft is literally night and day different than what
So
it is to throw hard. So from a return to throw perspective, that's probably the least applicable means by which to go through, or the least applicable route, at least in
no,
my perspective.
no, I agree with you. And I don't get too meticulous, especially when someone's returning to throw or, throwing at lower percentages,
Yeah.
because like you said, it's going to be a totally different movement problem. Your body's trying to slow itself down to throw slower or make all these different compensations, right? So it's almost like, hey, are you going to critique someone just, doing a slight warm-up jog, you know, 15 yards down, 15 yards back? No, you want to assess them when they're going full on 100% top
Yep.
speed and go from there, right? Like that's what you need to assess, or
Yeah.
even break it down even more. I'd rather see game video with a batter in the box, all these other variables added in.
Yep.
Then we can kind of see how things go, right? Like, and I'm guilty of this too, but sometimes we put guys too much into of that vacuum where they're like, hey, we're only controlling these variables. Sometimes you got to throw in some random ones and see what
Yeah.
happens, right?
Yep.
Especially when it comes more sport specific, right? Like you got to find out where the breaking point is and then be like, okay, hey, this is where we got to hang out and do what you
Yep.
suck at, basically. This is
Yeah.
essentially
No,
it.
I love that approach. And like you said, I think if we can't see you go full tilt, right, it's going to be really, really hard for us to reverse engineer what has to be changed,
Hmm.
right? Because we're reverse engineering essentially an unfinished picture, an unfinished diagram.
Yeah.
So that's super important too. But the one thing I will note though is I think on the other side of this equation, you have guys who are always go, right?
Oh yeah.
And you're like trying to tell these guys, like, holy shit, dude, like, listen, right? So one of the big cues I use, especially for position players and sprinters, I actually have a guy who's formerly in the big league with the Washington Nationals, who's currently in indie ball, hoping to get it here. But one of my big cues for him is peace, and he always looks at me like I'm crazy the first time I say it. Right, it always takes like 3 cues, right, when he's sprinting, and I tell him right before. And I have a video somewhere on my Instagram about like even the breath work before a sprint, before a
Yeah.
time sprint. Right, if you're a guy who seems to be always chilled out and kind of hanging
Yeah.
out, then maybe a better breath would be 3 hard ones. Right, give a little excitatory stimulus. On the flip side of that, though, this guy I'm talking about, like he's always go, right? So when
Very,
he
very
steps in the
hard.
batter's box, when he's about to sprint, I'd much rather him take one giant belly breath for a 4 count and then exhale completely and try to get his mind centered on one particular purpose. This guy, I mean, he played Power 5 school, was an All-American, high draft pick, all those things. So he's already competed at the highest level. We already know he can do it. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, the more cues I give you, the by far the worse you get. If he's in a cage session, you flip him a baseball and you can literally say to him, like, hey, hit ball, and he'll buggy whip a baseball. You say, hey, listen, I want you to try to like coil your back hip and just try to stay in it just a tick longer. He'll literally roll 4 in a row over, pop 2 up, and then he'll slam the bat on home plate. You're like, you're like, with those guys, it's one word and it's a focus on like just this idea of trust. And like I said, our word that I use with him is literally peace. I say, hey, peace. Like be at peace within your body, be at peace within the run, be at peace within the swing, because we already know from a technical tactical model, you're the one of the best, you're top 1% in the world. There's literally a handful, we can count how many guys, if I take off my socks, how many guys are better than you at this. Like, there's no cue that I'm going to give you in this one moment that is going to extrapolate all of your ability, right? But what could extrapolate the vast majority of your ability is if you were just at peace with yourself and at peace with your movement process in this one moment. So there's both sides of that where it's like, hey, I need you to see you go full tilt so I know where to fix it. But on the flip side, when you do go full tilt all the time, we might actually have to fix that idea, that construct, and the way in which you approach that to get really in the zone, to take this thing kind of full circle to what your specialty is, you know?
Love it. No, yeah, that's awesome. And I I actually have seen a trend of this too, for kind of going on those two extremes of guy who's very loose,
Yep.
go with the flow, or a guy who's very tense. Mentally is like where they're at. Also definitely correlates with their physical body, right?
Yep.
Like the guys who are really loose are probably really floppy and just kind of like loosey goosey.
Yep.
Other guys are very tightly wound, very stiff, and maybe herky jerky movers within their throwing
Hmm.
delivery. So, yeah, like sometimes when you introduce those, it's almost kind of a not a I don't want to say a hurdle because that kind of sounds has a bad connotation to it, but it's almost like a different state of mind that they need to be in for
Yep.
them to get in their zone and
Yeah.
help them be at peace. Or hey, like let's amp this thing up, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna flip how they're gonna move, how they're going to perform, how they really do anything.
Yeah.
It's
I,
good for guys to know what that, I guess, prototype is for them, what
yep.
they need, versus a guy who's already amped up and he tries to listen to more amped up music and more stuff to try to just
Yep.
push it to
Go,
the
go, go.
extreme. It may
Yeah.
have worked one time, right?
Yep.
No.
Another rain energy drink. Just one more. Shotgun
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah. Or, I mean, we probably do this too, where it's like, hey, we like to do things that we're good at. Or, a guy who's super
Of course.
chill and relaxed, he might love to do yoga and love to do all that stuff, but hates strength training. Or vice
Yep.
versa. The other guy's like super big power lifter type guy, or just loves to move heavy weight. And he's like, I don't like stretching. I don't like doing this. Right. Like you got to
Yep.
have almost a blend where the truth is in the middle for a lot of guys.
Yeah, the truth is that it's really finding what the limiting factor is, right?
Mm,
And like the mentality, all of these things that we're talking about are all coactives, right? The psychology of an athlete, his physicality, like how he presents from a movement perspective, a biomotor perspective, a biodynamic perspective, and then like his approach from what he's been exposed to previous, right?
mm.
All of those things are always like essentially acting on the athlete at all times. And that's really what makes good coaches good, or separates good from great coaches, maybe even,
Yeah. Yeah.
is how we manage all of those together. How we manage the way in which we communicate, the way in which we program, the way in which we then cue and encourage and critique the athlete within the micro session, and then the impact we have on them beyond that, right? How we teach them to advocate for themselves, and how we kind of guide them down this journey of self realization.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I think a lot of this too, you know, if we really had to break this and sum it up this entire episode into one thing, I think it's more of breaking down to communication,
Yep.
learning. And I love what you said at the very beginning too, the permission, right? Because early on, I was like, oh, hey, someone's doing something wrong. I have to go and like fix it,
Yep.
right? Or, you know,
I remember
maybe
those days,
even,
dude.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, or even for athletes too, like, everybody's a little analytical and some can be over analytical. They see some video and they're like, oh, I have to go fix this. Or hey, like here's the report of what my metrics are. Okay, let's let's fix this. But sometimes, it's not always that. It's more of trying to find out, okay, hey, this is what I need right now to get to the next point, or the next,
Yeah.
I guess, lack of better terms, like those stepping points or stepping stones to get to that end goal that you need. Referring back
Yeah.
to Jimmy trying to play in the big leagues, but he's 14 years old.
Yeah. Well, it's Jimmy's got to be process oriented. And if he
Mhm.
can't be because he's 14, then coach has to be process oriented. And a lot of times it's a really hard conversation where you say, "Hey, I'm not going to fix everything right now." That's actually not even my goal. Jimmy's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Or Jimmy's dad, worse, Jimmy's dad's in the car
Yeah.
like, "The hell are you talking about?" You're like, "No, like I want to have this." And there's a very real physical restraint to that as well, right? Like and we're seeing it with arm injuries. We're seeing all the things right now at the highest level, right? Big leaguers get hurt at a higher clip now than previous. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's very similar, but the higher named guys, the higher marquee names are getting hurt at a very high clip. So it's in the kind of the public eye. And it's like, well, Yeah, so there's a physical limitation to maximizing all of your performance metrics, right? When you hit that wall is going to be very dependent on the steps that you take and the process that you orientate yourself around. Is orientate a word? That you orient maybe that you orientate yourself around along the way, right? So at 14, having the conversation with Jimmy where it's like, "Hey man, I want you to be healthy and happy and continue to develop all the way through high school, all the way through college and then potentially get the opportunity to play in the big leagues or in professional baseball, that's a very different conversation than, hey, I'm going to get you throwing as hard as possible now. Everyone knows a guy from their hometown who threw their hardest at 13.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like everyone knows that. We have, there's like a legend around South Jersey of one guy. I won't say his name because that's embarrassing. Of one guy who literally threw 84 miles an hour when he was 12. And his senior year at a local Division III college, I won't say the college, also threw 83, 84 miles an hour. Right? It's like you always have those stories. There are those legends, right? So what separates them and a guy who is growing up in a similar environment with similar coaching and with similar application? Well, it's the process that they took, right? It's the ability for the athlete and or the parent at some level to say like, hey, let's kind of slow cook this. It's really hard to burn things in a slow cooker.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's the approach that you got to have and have that long-term mindset. If you want
Yeah,
to have a long career, you got to slow cook it. You can't throw it in the microwave and expect it to be just as good as something that was slow cooked, right?
exactly right. And then at the highest level, right, we have to be really careful about those cookie cutter models too, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we want to fit everybody into a box so bad.
Yeah,
We want to get everybody's back hip to do this or front side to do that, that we start to take away what makes a guy great. And I see that so often with my
that's
pro
so
guys.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you know what really
You
makes
hate
you
to see
great?
it, but yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something where I guess you could get it to that point where some coaches think, oh, there's a nail, yeah, it needs a hammer, right?
Yep.
Like just having that same approach to everyone doesn't always work. That's why there's so many other tools in the toolbox,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively that you could use to get
Yeah.
certain adaptations.
Yeah. Like I love that you just said that because I say that all the time. I go, a novice coach has a hammer. And if all you got is a hammer, everything's got to be a nail, so everything's got to be like, there was a lot of camps and I did a talk for other strength conditioning coaches a couple months back. And I said, there's kind of like these two or three camps that are abound in every sport, right? You have like whatever the sport is in baseball. It's like, just get them stronger, that camp. And then you have the other camp that's like, just throw. And it's like, both of those are wrong, like
Yeah.
within some level, right? Some of them might work really well for an athlete today and that might stop working or vice
Yeah.
versa,
Or
right?
that's maybe the dosage that that kid needed at that particular point in time. Yeah.
Exactly right, right? The poison, all medicine is poison depending on dosage,
Mm.
right? And I tell my students all the time at the college, I say, listen, if you drank a bottle of cough syrup, you're in for a tough time. But if you have a cough and you take a tablespoon or two, it'll probably help suppress your cough, right? Same thing goes here. If we're going to do whatever, if it's just get them stronger, well, getting someone strong up until a point is helpful. It is suppressing the cough. But then when we continue to chase that for no apparent reason, because whatever social media says, or because we believe that from a construct standpoint, it's like, well, now we've drank the whole bottle of cough syrup, right? We've essentially pushed ourselves beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond a point of stimulus fatigue that makes sense. And now I have no true energy left to go and actually practice the technical tactical demands.
Yep.
And on the flip side of that, if I'm just always throwing, always throwing, always throwing, always placing this very specific demand on the tissues and structures of the body, well, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know if I swing the door one way 100,000 times a day, that these hinges will eventually wear out, right? So, like, if I'm going to wear these hinges out, is there anything I can do that applies a little bit more structural integrity to those hinges and or oils them effectively, like WD-40 does, right? And like we have modalities for that, but if we don't pair those modalities effectively, we're in for a tough time. And I'm sorry, I just jacked that what you were saying, but yeah,
No, you're good. I love it.
yeah,
That's
went off
awesome.
on a tangent there.
I'm all about some tangents.
Yeah.
We're in it. That's why we're here.
Yeah, man.
Love it. I guess one of the other questions that I have for you too, and I'm curious if you've seen this through a lot of younger guys too. A lot of younger players, typically, 12 to 15 range. I'm seeing a lot more growth plate stuff showing up.
Yep.
What is your take? And again, I'll kind of share mine after, but what is your take as to why there's so many of those popping up more recently within, I guess, the last 4 or 5 years than previously?
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, if I had to put a finger on it, so one of the issues with like creating content, right? And you know this issue too. And
Hmm,
as soon as I say it, you're gonna laugh. Is like that you have to be hyper controversial to like create good content, like
sure.
content that's like viral, right? And the problem with me is that I'm not. So I'm just because I kind of see it, right? I'm literally by trade I'm a professor, I'm a coach, and like to me it's like very clear that there are truths kind of that exist along a continuum, right?
Mhm.
Where there is no kind of black and white. So all injuries to that end are multifactorial, right? I think the growth plate, the rise in growth plate is one of those things. It's multifactorial. But I think if we had to point at something, I'd say early specialization is probably the biggest issue that we have in this country from a long-term athletic perspective. Our athletes get better younger, they burn out faster, and they have higher specificity injuries or higher specific joint injuries earlier on. Whereas on the flip side of that, because of that, you see significantly more general injuries because of the highest level guys lack specific preparation. And we have sort of a survivorship bias
Okay. Yeah.
towards, yeah, and we have sort of a
Yeah.
survivorship bias towards the specific structures, right? There's no big leaguer's elbow, but there is little leaguer's elbow, right? So like that idea, that construct, it's not to say that we don't tear UCLs in the big leagues, we do, for sure, right? But you see a lot of general injuries, you see a lot of groin, a lot of hamstring strains, right? For a long time, and I don't know, I haven't done the applicable like kind of homework or research this year, but for a long time there was like a 6 or 7 year stretch where the highest injury or the highest percentage of injuries, excuse me, was hamstring strains, like for a long time,
Oh
and
yeah. I think it was
that's like
hamstring strains and then obliques were like right after that for the next couple
yeah.
of years.
And guys could make an argument for obliques being specific because of the rotational forces, but hamstrings are relatively general. Like
Oh yeah.
that's but it's because we're so specific for so long. And at the younger ages, you're not seeing little leaguers blow out hamstrings, right? They don't produce enough force, but
Right.
you are seeing them put very specific force vectors through the exact same joints over and over and over again. And we go back to my reference on the door and the hinges, right? Like we're not doing anything to bolster the robustness of those hinges. So that's why I think that the increase in growth plate injuries is so common now. That, and then if we want to point a second arrow, that second arrow has got to go towards nutrition, right?
Love it.
Because
Yep.
our guys are malnourished, like almost legitimately, right? Where
All the
the average,
processed foods is all they got
yeah,
access to, or
and
all
they
the
don't even eat.
snacking on.
Dude, we got high school guys that don't eat. What you eat for breakfast? Nothing. I had a bar. It's like, what? What you eat for lunch? I don't like our school lunch. Bro, it's 5 p.m. You've eaten 135 calories today. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So,
Depriving themselves without even really knowing it, and then they gorge at night, and that's
yeah.
just
Then
yeah.
then they just rip Chipotle. And it's like, well, that Chipotle was pretty good, but that was only 1,400 calories. Like, what about the other 15 to 2,000 calories you needed? You know?
Oh yeah, it's got to start where I mean, if you even lack that fuel, if you want to use that car engine analogy again too, right? Like you can't even have the capacity to go to your governor if you got no
Yeah.
gas in the tank.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And then, and then the third one, again, like multifactorial, then I would to sleep. TikTok, and I'm on TikTok too. I got TikTok. I post on there every day or something like that. But our guys are up to 1 a.m. watching that stuff, man. And that's another thing we address with these guys,
Hmm.
right? Where you're constantly comparing yourself, right? Comparison, the thief of all joy. You're on TikTok till 2 a.m. comparing your real life to somebody else's highlight reel and wondering why yours doesn't look like that. And then we go full circle into like more the psychology realm where you're really strong and you're passionate about, and it's like the psychology of that factors into the injury.
Hmm.
The the lack of sleep from a physical standpoint factors into the injury. The lack of high quality fuel factors into the injury. But I think if we had to point at one specific thing, it's the specific demands placed on the athlete at a young age and really year round. So if you were like, CJ, fix it, it's impossible to fix, right? Because
Yeah,
they're,
because it is so multifactorial, like you said.
yep. And there's huge businesses based around it too. You know, I won't say any of that. I'm not going to get crazy on here like Terrence Howard or anything and start like saying I broke
Start
gravity.
calling everyone out.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, but to that point, like there's huge money in travel sports. There's huge money
Oh, sure.
in those businesses, right? So you're not going to overcome that. But the best thing to do is allow kids to strength train with a professional, probably year round. And I used to say, by the way, I used to say like even to check my own ego, let them train by themselves, like let them do push-ups and pull-ups. But the problem is that they just won't. They won't do it.
It's
Number
sad,
one.
but true. Yeah.
And number two, when they go to the gym, like with their friends in high school, what they do there is 90% of the time counterproductive. It's like,
Prepping triceps and bicep curls.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like max out on the bench every day and
Yeah.
then biceps and triceps. Yeah. So that's almost counterproductive. So have them train with a professional and then have them compete or participate at in different sports, right? Dude, if you want to be an elite athlete your freshman or sophomore year in college, then wrestle in the winter, do fall sport, whether that's football or whatever, and
Yeah.
then go play baseball or run track at whatever season, depending on your state that falls in, and take that other sport out and then play baseball. If you want to be in the elite.
Got to have a really good local foundation or global foundation before you get too specific. And
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Did you
One,
see the draft pick thing for there was like a big thing going viral for a bit. It was like X amount of draft picks. I wish I remembered because I didn't like
oh,
prepare
was
any.
it saying like these amount played like
Yep.
multi-sports, things like
Yep.
that?
Yeah. It
Sure.
was like, yeah. It's like the vast majority of first round draft picks across all sports, by the way, which is even more insane, right? Like, so the NFL first round draft picks, the MLB first round draft picks, like
And
the
the NBA,
percentage of them,
NHL.
exactly, and the
Yeah.
NBA, that the percentage of them that are multi sport athletes in high school is significant. I'll just say significant because I don't remember what the actual stat was.
Yeah.
I don't want to make shit up, but it was a significant percentage. So it's like that should be telltale, right? And those guys probably had access to strength and conditioning at some level too,
Oh, for sure.
right? So now
Well,
we have a
yeah.
super diverse kind of movement category or movement selection category to pull from. And then, like you said, then we can get specific.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you find this because I do. The athletes that have done and been exposed to a lot of stuff, when I go to teach them a new skill, they pick it up quick. They have significantly more movement reference points to refer back to and context drivers to build context around a new movement skill where they're like, oh, yeah, do this. They don't know how to say it, how to call it. I don't know how to call that, right? But it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
this. It's like, oh, okay. All of a
It's like,
sudden they
oh,
get
it
it.
was like this in this sport, or it's like a
Yeah,
pivot in the. I'm like, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, whatever you said. Yeah. So sport you don't know. You're like, yeah, whatever, man. Like that.
No, it's so true. I mean, for them to be able to pick up on that like that too, like that's one of the things that you can tell if guys are going to be elite athletes or not, is if they're able to pick up on that. Um,
Yeah.
and it's for me, I also sometimes feel like I have to fill that gap within my programming sometimes for guys who do specialize,
Yep.
because it's like, hey, ultimately it's your decision. Like I can inform you as much as I want, but for me to give you different types of movements and show you how you can do things a little bit differently, or like, hey, like show me how many different ways you can jump.
Yep.
And some of them will stare you blank in the face, like, what do you mean? Like 2 feet, 1 feet, jump on top of a box, jump off a box, right? Like
Yeah.
a bunch of little things here, just like, hey, let's explore, let's move. And it
Yeah.
kind of goes into that whole, are you cognitively engaged in the task that you're doing? I like to do that for a lot of guys too, where you just give them that task and then sometimes they come up with stuff that you can't even think of, but they get stuck in that rut of doing the swing, the throw, the too specific stuff where, like you said, it just does kind of boil down to that. So yeah, no, I love the take. It's awesome.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? What was your thought?
I do. I think a lot of people, they're pointing too much of the finger to, oh, we have pitch counts or we have this, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I posed this thing on Twitter. I was like, look, and you kind of alluded to a little bit too about being on social media, but I was like, what's happened within the last 20 years within baseball? And then you take a zoom out, what else has been introduced within the last 20 years? These things,
Yep.
right? So a lot of other people, rounded shoulders, forward head movement, right? Like
Yep.
I'm sure if you talk to any chiropractor, they'll probably tell you the exact same thing, right? But you have that poor posture and
Yep.
that forward head movement, that's going to lead to a lot of those compensations through the shoulder. TOS is kind of on the rise too. So I was like
Yep.
light bulb there. And sure enough, weak link elbow. Those are
Yep.
going to be blown out. So to kind of wrap it up, all those factors, right? I was like, yep, definitely nutrition, definitely, how guys are moving. The early specialization is definitely a piece, but things even outside of the training of the 1 to 2 hours out of the day that they're going to be
100%.
stuck in a
Yep.
seated position in a classroom or hunched over on their phone or playing a video game or whatever it is. I mean, even
Yep.
early on in my coaching career, I was like, hey, like when you're respawning between Call of Duty bouts or when,
Yeah.
whatever it is you're playing Fortnite, like
Yep.
give me some of these, get some thoracic extension involved, right?
Yeah.
Get mobile a little bit and, just like pick 3 mobility exercises. You die, cool. You're getting up, you're doing something
Yeah.
in
Three
between
reps.
until you're
Yeah.
ready to rock. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't, if you're on my team in Call of Duty, don't be doing that though. Cause I need you ready to roll. I
Need
need
to
you
ready to
hot. I
rock.
need you hot on the sticks. Listen, if we're in Rebirth Island, I need you hot on the sticks. I don't
Oh,
want
true. Very true. It's all in the context of what you need it for, right?
exactly context driven. Do those during the warm up games. Don't mess around when we're we're live, dude.
Make
I
sure
want
you
you
get all that in beforehand, and then
exactly. I want you
you earn the right
sweating
to
with
go in.
with a G Fuel. Be ready.
Oh boy, G Fuel. I haven't had that in a minute. I love the peach rings flavor. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I go all black coffee. I drink this. I drink one of these a day.
Wow.
These things are pretty sweet.
Stokes cold
Yeah.
brews.
Yeah. I get them at Target. I just go every week and I buy 6 of them and then I don't drink one on Sunday.
There you go. Give yourself
Yeah.
some recovery time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't blow out my adrenal cortex here, you know.
I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah, man.
CJ, I really appreciate your time, my man. Any other last closing thoughts or anything for anybody?
Nah, man, I think we covered a whole lot. I hope I said something at some level that's valuable or inspiring or encouraging to someone, whether that's an athlete or a coach. And if I can help in any way, just reach out. Don't
Yeah, how
reach
can
out
I
to
reach out to you?
yeah, exactly. So at Happy Hour everywhere. So it's Happy Hour with no H, Happy Hour. That's Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That's where I post all the time. Reach out to me though if you want to reach out. If you need me, just DM me on Instagram. I check them every single day and I answer. So
Love it. Awesome. Well, for those of you listening, appreciate you tuning in and stay in the zone.